Yeah, sorry, I'd started doing my spiel and I was on mute. So, good evening. Welcome to the second lecture of the session for the Railway Division, IMechE Railway Division, Midlands Centre. I hope everyone's okay. Obviously, we're still in a situation where we're delivering these remotely, and in the current climate, I hope everyone's well and family and friends are well. Tonight's lecture is actually a joint lecture with the Permanent Way Institute, and we've got Liam Purcell, who's the Nottingham and Derby section head. So, Liam, if I can just ask you to say a few words of introduction.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Just like to welcome the PWI members to tonight's joint event and pass on my thanks to the IMechE for making the arrangements and setting up tonight's event. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Liam. Yeah, and welcome to colleagues from the Permanent Way Institute. Just for logistics before we kick off proceedings, for those who were on the last lecture, the first lecture of the session with David Horton from Viva Rail, very much the same for tonight. Everyone, if you weren't on that one, the proceedings are everyone remains muted and cameras are off. There will be, I'll hand over to our presenter. I'll introduce our presenter and hand over in a minute, and then we'll do the presentation. At the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. In this format, we do that via the question and answer tab at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So at any point during the lecture or when we finished, if you've got a question you'd like to ask, if you can just type it out into that box. I will run down the questions at the end. I'll read them out, and David will then answer them. Do his best to answer them. So, without further ado, I will now introduce our speaker. So it's David Powell, who's the Programme Director Rolling Stock at Merseyrail. By way of introduction, David has over 30 years of experience in the public transport industry. He's currently leading the replacement of the Merseyrail fleet, so bringing new class 777 rolling stock, but also leading the associated programme of infrastructure works and improvements. So tonight's paper is looking at the, if you like, the whole system change that David's leading, and sort of in the context of the PlatformTrain Interface. So on that basis, David, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason. Let me just bring up my presentation. If somebody could just let me know that it has landed successfully on the screen.
Yeah, that's fine, David.
Is that up there? Is that in slideshow mode as well?
It is, yes.
Okay, that's great. Good. Right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and hello everybody. So yeah, as I said, I'm the Programme Director for Merseyrail. So we're one of the PTEs that was set up 50 odd years ago, and I'm going to run you through some of the characteristics of what is one of the biggest infrastructure programs that we've undertaken in the Liverpool City region. And on the railway, it's probably the biggest program of work since the Loop and Link were created back in the 1970s. So I feel very privileged to have been given the opportunity to lead this program of works, and I've just been through my 8th anniversary of working at Merseyrail. So I'm also, I think it's really timely to have the Permanent Way Institution together with the mechanicals, because there's an awful lot of rolling stock included in what we're doing. But as Jason suggested in the introduction, and I'm sure probably just about everyone in the audience knows, you don't just look at one discipline in isolation. Major railway programs are multidisciplinary undertakings, and we've got some, I think, particularly interesting and slightly different characteristics of the way that we've approached things, and I'm looking forward to talking you through that. So there is a little bit of Permanent Way in this as well, then, and quite a lot of other disciplines too. Okay, a little bit. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I thought I heard somebody say something. Okay. Right, a little bit about the background to Merseyrail. If I give this presentation up in our part of the world, I'll skip over this slide pretty quickly, but I'm guessing some people might be a little bit less familiar with our network than the local audience. So Merseyrail, it's one of the smaller train operating companies, but it's characterised by DC electrification. And we've got the Loop and Link, the project done back in the 70s. created a network of tunnels. So it extended the tunnels that came under the river and extended them through the city centre. So we've got getting on for 7 miles worth of tunnel network at the core of our network, where our 2 lines, we have 4 lines from the Wirral on the west side of the River Mersey. They all converge into the tunnel that comes under the Mersey and then go around the loop, one after the other. And then on the other side, on the Liverpool side, we're basically a north-south railway with a variety of spurs coming together and running underground through the city centre. When I joined, I've known the railway throughout. I'm actually from the city down the road that also has a football team that plays red and blue, and they don't let me forget it at the moment because I support the red one. The railway feels in many ways like a metro to me. I've worked on a lot of tramways and metros throughout my career, both here in the UK, but also in various other parts of the world. And even though we are part of the national rail network, we are heavy rail, we have a lot of characteristics that are akin to what you'd encounter on a metro system elsewhere. So we've actually spent an awful lot of time talking to our friends at Tyne and Wear Metro, who actually, there's an awful lot of similarities between the projects that they're undertaking and what we're doing. Well, included in that is actually the age of our fleet. The graph on the right-hand side shows the relative age of the fleets on the various train operating companies. And we're the red bar over on the right-hand side, where with our fleet now is well over 40 years old. They were built at the tail end of the 1970s and into the beginning of the 1980s. And they're not doing badly. I mean, given their age, to be fair, the 507, 508s have performed pretty well. In fact, we're at the highest level of reliability that we think we've ever achieved, or certainly in the memory of anyone who's actually still working on the railway. But nonetheless, they're very much starting to show their age. And no matter how well we look after them, there comes a point at which things do start to genuinely creak. We're also running out of other fleets to cannibalise spare parts from. And so we'll see. Okay, another feature of our railway, and we were the pioneers of this approach back at the beginning of the noughties. The concept of devolution was being kicked around, and we were the first railway undertaking to devolve control from the Department for Transport to the PTI, Merseyrail. That took place in 2002, which meant that we ran the competition to appoint the operator, and the arrangement was the first concession agreement as opposed to a franchise agreement. So it's a slightly different model to what we've got with most of the railway. But I know there's lots of talk of the way in which I think we all know the industry is going to go through some pretty serious change. I'm not going to pretend I know what all of that looks like. But the concession model is one that is being talked about quite extensively at the moment, and we were probably the pioneers of that approach. And generally, without there being a major project yet, we've incrementally invested in the railway. The local management of the railway, both us as the awarding authority and the operator, we both know the rail extremely well. We know each other extremely well. It's a business-like arrangement. It doesn't mean to say that we're all mates and we all make all the decisions together. That's not the way it runs. But we are very involved. We're very hands-on in the day-to-day shaping of the direction of travel for the railway, whereas we leave our operator, Merseyrail, to actually do the delivery of service to the customers. We know that it feels quite different to the way that many of the other train operators act, and the way in which the awarding authorities sometimes act once the contract has been let. So we've had this arrangement with a 50-50 joint venture between Serco and Abellio. That's actually a 25-year-long contract, so it's a very, very long duration. And I'm pleased to say it's had an awful lot more positive and successful components than things that have gone hopelessly wrong. It doesn't mean to say life's not without challenges, but overall, we think the railway has improved dramatically over the years. We used to be known by the rather unfortunate title of Merseyrail, but the only person who ever talks about Merseyrail nowadays, I think, is me, by making reference to the fact that nobody ever calls us Merseyrail. So the sort of area that we've got ourselves into is that Merseyrail secured the award of Passenger Operator of the Year a couple of years ago. We regularly top the punctuality performance league tables, which is good. We pride ourselves on it, and we are routinely either top or very close to the top of the passenger satisfaction surveys. Doesn't mean to say that everything is absolutely perfect. It's not. It would be a fool if I pretended it was. There's always things to improve. But what it means for me, in my perspective, leading the big investment in the railway, is that we're starting from a very good place, and it's really it sits heavily on me that I've got something very good. So let's make it better. Okay, so let's get into why we're replacing the fleet of trains. Part of it is because they're old, and they are, but they still work. And for an old fleet of trains, they perform reasonably well. In fact, I was chatting to some of the guys at Modern Railways today about, we were speculating as to whether there might be a spanner in the offering with our improvement in reliability. Also, we're running out of other sort of fleets that are from the same era as us to compete with for golden spanners. So the competition might get a little bit easier. But that isn't actually why we were doing it. So I spent a lot of time working with colleagues and stakeholders, working through why do we actually want to do this? We're not just doing this because they're old. There's a whole series of benefits and improvements to the railway that we want to drive as part of replacing the fleet. And that takes us very much into the system engineering approach, whereby we're looking at the infrastructure just as much as we're looking at the fleet of trains. So, top of the list, safety. We had a very, very high profile and accident back in 2011, where a young passenger fell between the train and the platform. So some of you might remember that. It was at James Street, which is one of our city centre stations. Hit the national press because the guard on the train ended up getting prosecuted. So I arrived to an RAIB report that made some very, very clear recommendations focused around improving the PlatformTrain interface. And that was actually an extremely helpful thing to have tucked under my elbow once I'd spent a not very enjoyable hour reading it, but the recommendations were very clear about let's drive improvement on the PlatformTrain interface, and that's shaped a lot of our thinking. We, again, I looked at the railway and I was thinking this is a metro. This has many of the characteristics of metros I've worked on both here in the UK, but also I've worked out in the Far East quite a bit. And we were looking at, right, what type of train do we want to buy? Do we want to just buy a multiple unit of the type that we see on many of the UK operators? We thought, well, we could do that, but why don't we look and see if we can push the envelope a little bit? So we started looking at modelling work to see whether we thought realistically we could get journey time reduction. A feature of our network is that we're around about 70 miles long, and we've got 67 stops. So our stop spacing is tighter than any other mainline operator. So it's just like a metro. It's all about acceleration and braking and managing dwell time, the way that we operate. And we think that we can get at least a 10% journey time reduction by improving a number of the characteristics of the rolling stock, but also the way in which we operate the train. So that was one it was a target that we set for ourselves, and we're on course to deliver that. Now, back when we were writing the business case for this, halcyon days of 8 years or so ago, we were living in a very benign environment, like much of the rest of the UK industry, where we were seeing consistently rising passenger numbers. We were seeing sort of between 2 and 3% growth year on year. And we knew that if we did nothing and just carried on running the old trains, actually we'd end up in a position where there were contractual obligations for crowding that were being breached, and the railway would be becoming increasingly uncomfortable for people to use. We know that our morning and evening peaks, they're not the same as some of the heaviest used London lines, but for a city outside London, we are up there, and some of our trains do get extremely crowded. So we're looking to increase passenger carrying capacity. And one of the basic choices we had is, do we do that by increasing rolling stock capacity, or do we do it by decreasing headway? And the view that we took is that the train is going to take the strain on this one. So we were looking to increase the passenger carrying capacity of the vehicles, but without turning them into cattle trucks. Interesting that, so that it's created a different dynamic for the type of train that we wanted to have come onto our network. If you're going to buy a new train, well, we've got trains from the 1970s. They're great electromechanical machines. We've got a few bits of microprocessor control on some of the systems that have been added over the years, but it's basically an electromechanical machine of the type that I was involved in building right back at the beginning of my career when I was at GC. A modern train we knew would have an awful lot of much more modern, up-to-date systems on board, and the opportunity to improve facilities for passengers. So rather than talk about it here, I'll show you some of the things that we've engaged in, and we think we're going to be creating a much better travelling environment for our passengers. A feature of the network at the moment is we've got a DC train that runs on a third rail, and that is the definition of Merseyrail. It's the end of the third rail. Longer term, again, strategic thinking that we've been developing in parallel with doing the business case for the new fleet. We want to improve. We see the railway as a major asset for the city. It's an economic asset, and we want to be able to expand the travel to work area. We believe that the demographics of how life is changing. We'll put COVID to one side for the minute. COVID has obviously changed everything for all of us on the railway, but on the basis that longer term, hopefully we'll get back to something resembling what we had before COVID, we could see people wanting to travel more directly over longer distances into our city centre, reduce the journey time and make it more convenient for people, give them the extra capacity. So we want to be able to, our fleet of trains to be able to operate beyond the third rail. So that led us to a couple of things, and I'll show you a photo section of the train in a minute. We specified the train to be dual voltage. It's only coming as a DC train at the moment. There's no point putting a pantograph and a transformer on it at the moment because there's no overhead wire to actually just be carrying a transformer around for however many years. So they're coming. They're designed as AC/DC. They're coming as DC only. But we've been watching the developments, and I bet you had an interesting presentation last time if you were talking to Merseyrail, who we know well, and they've been one of the most prominent companies in terms of trialling battery powered trains. But we're in that equation as well. So we have space underneath the train to fit all the AC equipment. That space could similarly be used for a fairly substantial battery pack, and that's something that we've been working with staff on. So we've got a train that we think is going to be able to serve a wider area because we've invested in the design of the train from the outset. Accessibility has featured very, very heavily. It goes hand in glove with the safety. We focused to start with on the safety of the PlatformTrain Interface, but that led us very rapidly into a world of looking at accessibility. My background, I've done quite a few of the tram systems around the UK, and trams generally, a PTI interface, they're very good at delivering. They generally assume, that the platform height is what it is. The floor of the train is slightly higher. The two of them align very well with each other, and you're given a very small vertical and horizontal gap to negotiate. We were looking to see whether we could apply that same logic and get a similar outcome on a heavy railway. And the particular challenge we faced was one of having nearly half of our platforms on curves of one sort or another. But we've made a lot of progress on that, and I'll show you some of that later on. We're very pleased with where we've got to now. Improved reliability. Well, the old trains aren't bad, but if you're going to buy a new train, buy one that proves to be reliable. Give me a few years to be able to give you the honest answer on that. All the designers tell us we're going to have a reliable fleet, but obviously we've still got to prove it because we're not yet in passenger service. Reduction of operation and maintenance costs. These trains are a lot more efficient. The drive system is miles more efficient than what it replaces. We've managed to drive weight out of the train, so we're going to be reducing our variable usage charge and taking out. So even though we're carrying more passengers and we're moving around the network more quickly, we believe we're going to be able to deliver at least a 20% energy saving, which also will reduce our carbon footprint. It's just a combination of what we think are good engineering measures will build up to a significant saving in energy consumption to deliver a better railway. Self-financing sustainable business model. That's something we work long and hard on. Next slide explains that a little bit. And we see this as a major economic tool. So that the programme is the capital investment is round about £500 million. We believe the boost to the city region's economy is of the order of £70 million per annum. And if you're buying an asset that lasts for a nominal 35 years, or maybe a bit longer, if we look after it well, that's a pretty good return. So the business case was actually very powerful. And getting these benefits articulated and properly understood by the stakeholders from the outset of the project, before we just said the trains are old, let's replace them. This gave them the context within which they understood the system engineering approach that we were taking, and they also got that in order to deliver this, you don't just buy a fleet of trains, you have to modify your infrastructure as well. Okay, a little bit about the business case. It goes with the devolution. We were able to do this ourselves. There wasn't that there was a model on the shelf. I've worked both private sector side and public sector, and I've seen various procurements, different rationales for doing it. This was trying to piece together various elements, and the fact that we've got the devolved management made that possible for us. The guts of it is the financials, where we've got savings in energy, savings in rolling stock maintenance, quite significant ones, operational cost savings, and then additional revenue from having additional capacity and a more attractive service. Those in the devolved environment, those flow around to Merseytravel. And it led us to making a decision. So we've had a very successful relationship with Angel Trains. So hello to anybody from any of the Roscoes who's on here, and hello particularly to Angel. I'm afraid it's going to come to an end. We took the business decision that it would be economically advantageous for us to own the rolling stock and lease it to our own operator, which in many ways is akin to the model that's used on metro railways and tramways around the world. It just hasn't been applied to the mainline network here in the UK before. So our successful relationship with Angel is going to come to a natural end when the 507 508s leave the network. But we've then got a job of asset ownership to undertake ourselves. So we led in this environment. We developed a bespoke procurement model. I won't talk you through all the bits, the little diagram over on the right, but it was a three-way relationship between ourselves, our operator, and whoever ended up as our successful rolling stock bidder, which is, I'm sure many of you are aware that became that Stadler were successful in securing the contract with us. And the three partners rely on each other. We also have, when we're looking at the infrastructure, we have a very, very close relationship with Network Rail, and we need to have that in order to deliver the project successfully. Financing, again, the tools available to the public sector body is very different to the private sector. So we're using three sources. One of them is our reserves, the money that we've accumulated over the years. There's a reasonably generous war chest has been built up by my predecessors, and I've been enjoying spending it. Public Works Loan Board, that's the Treasury. That's what local devolved authorities like us, we can access Treasury funding at pretty competitive rates. And I was able to secure £190 million from the European Investment Bank before we left the European Union. I don't know if I was the last UK project to be able to access that, but I was certainly amongst the last. I felt as though I was sort of clinging onto a drawbridge that was in the process of coming up, negotiating that, getting it agreed as the Brexit process was taking place. But anyway, we secured our £190 million at very competitive rates. We used our competitive process. Historically, Merseyrail has had in-house maintenance undertaken by a team of about 150 Merseyrail staff. We knew that the model of outsourcing maintenance is one that's a well-proven path. Lots of successful examples in the industry, and others where it's not been quite as successful. We decided, right, we'll hedge our bets at the beginning of the procurement and use the competitive process to determine which way we're going to go. It helped us shape the decision that we're going to contract out maintenance. So now we have the old fleet is being maintained by Stadler. That arrangement has been in place for 3 years. So we transferred the 150 or so staff from Merseyrail to Stadler 3 years ago, and they're now delivering extremely strong performance with the old fleet, which we hope augurs well for the delivery of the new fleet. You always try to get the balance of risk right between the parties. I don't feel as though we've got it wrong, but we haven't finished doing everything yet, so something could leap out and give me an unpleasant surprise. we were certainly trying to get it right, but we've got to a point where all parties at least feel that they're empowered to do what they want to do. And as a consequence, as I mentioned before, we are going to be the only public sector mainline owner of mainline rolling stock. And we think that's an interesting model that others might want to have a look at. Right, a little bit about the trains themselves. So Stadler, we had a strong competitive process. I'm guessing there might be some participants here who might work for some of the other bidders. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. We really did have a strong competition on our hands. We pre-qualified 5, we got 4 bidders, refined it down, and ultimately we had a difficult choice to make, but Stadler were selected as our bidder. A particular characteristic, we knew that we could do something a little bit bespoke. It's our own fleet of trains. And we did a 2-stage process, starting before we ran the procurement. We appointed Transport Focus to work very closely with us on working out what our passengers actually wanted, rather than just assuming that I know. That was interesting. In my interview, I was asked, what features do you think Merseyrail passengers want on the new trains? And I gave what was quite a risky answer. I said, you know what, I haven't got a clue, because I've been working on Manchester Merseyrail for the last 7 years, which is where I was before I came here. But I'm not. But I will go and find out, and that's part of the job. And that wasn't the answer that was written down on the card in front of all the people who were interviewing me. But apparently they quite liked it. So that's what we did. We went off and we engaged a structured process of research as we were writing the train specification. So this is going back 6-7 years. And then once we'd awarded the contract, we then had we built into the contract that the design process would involve an interactive process with Transport Focus facilitating it, and with passengers. So we ended up with a panel of 40 passengers who worked with us all the way through the design process. I think they got it absolutely spot on at both stages of research. I'm delighted. They helped us make choices, and in some cases, what the passengers told us, I think they came up with better answers than the technocrats like me came up with. Just because I'm a mechanical engineer and I used to design trains doesn't mean I know everything about what Merseyrail passengers want. They know much better than I do, and they told us, and we were able to adapt the design to suit. So that was a really pleasing part of the process. What we've got here is a bespoke train. It's not a flirt. It's not the same as the trains that are in service on Anglia. It's not the same as the ones that are going to go in Wales. In fact, an awful lot of the designers came from the South Yorkshire Tram Train project. And a lot of our comments at the beginning of the design process was pointing out that actually, no, we don't go to Meadowhall. Could you please actually put destinations that reflect where the ends of our routes are, rather than the tram train from Sheffield, please? So we actually inherited a lot of the designers who worked on that project. They were from Valencia, which was acquired by Stadler as the tram train was being delivered. So we ended up with a lot of people who were very familiar with the UK environment, and quite a challenging project from what I can tell. Anyway, we're not going to go to Meadowhall. And this, in essence, has got many of the features of a metro train, but it's designed to mainline standards. It's a blend between the two types of rolling stock, and I think it's going to work very well on our network. A little bit about the manufacturing base spread around. Stadler are a Swiss company by their headquarters, but they've actually got plants in quite a few locations. They've got a specialist welded aluminium plant in Hungary, which is where all of our body shells have come from. The bogies were designed and manufactured in Valencia in Spain. And then we've got 2 assembly plants, one in the east of Switzerland, just near the Austrian border, a location called Altenrhein, which some people might know, but it's not the Buznang headquarters that many people associate with Stadler. It's a smaller plant that does metros and double deckers. And then there's another plant in Switzerland, over in eastern Poland, where half of the rolling stock is coming from. We elected to do a lot of the testing in Germany, so we had trains on test at Wildenrath, the Siemens facility, from around about a year ago. I've got a lot of the type testing done over there, and we've now migrated testing into the UK. And our first train arrived with us January 2020, at the beginning of this year, just as we were starting to hear about something horrible called COVID. But at that point was lots of strange news articles about people in China not being allowed out of tower blocks. Little did we know what was going to happen to us. I found out pretty quickly though, didn't we? Okay, a little bit about the train design. I have to say, I personally have changed my attitude enormously to virtual reality through this project. I was always pretty skeptical about it. I'd seen various versions of VR through the 90s, through the first couple of decades of this millennium, and this, for the first time, I found a tool that was of the quality that was able to really help us shape a lot of the design choices that we were making. The three of the images here are actually from the virtual reality headset that I ended up spending an awful lot of my time in. Quite a lot of our passengers that we were interacting with similarly, so we were looking at different arrangements and different layouts, different colours, there were all sorts of things. I've become a convert to virtual reality, having been 5 years ago rather sceptical about it. The bottom right-hand image, that's the old way of doing it, and we blended these together. That's a full-scale modern wooden mock-up that we have developed to finalise. You still can't do the spatial stuff as well in virtual reality. You can't judge how far this element is from that. Was still better done with the old style approach of wooden mock-ups. And we ended up with this tool that I have to say, one of my favourite moments is when we took our panel of 40 who we've been talking to. We got to know them over the course of about a year, and we've been asking them questions online, and they've been doing weekend events and all sorts of stuff with them. Brought them to see that wooden mock-up, and some of the faces were just an absolute picture. And people just saying, "Oh, you were actually listening to us." Yes, we were. An awful lot of what they selected is what's gone into the train itself, and I think it was a really wholesome and positive part of the project, which I would advocate for anyone else who's involved in design, where you've got a good degree of flexibility available to you. This process worked very well. Okay, so we got to our first unit. This is almost exactly a year ago. This was unit number 1. The night before it went off to Wildenrath. I always put this photo up just because I like the lighting on it. It was sunset in Switzerland, and I think the sun just caught the paintwork particularly well. This got a huge wow when we got this image back to the UK. People started, "Oh my God, it's real." Well, yes, it is. It's very real. Okay, here we are inside. So this was the first unit. The ambience we were looking for: light, bright, open and airy. That's what our passengers had told us they wanted. The feedback we got basically was the train works very well for seated passengers, the existing trains. The legroom is reasonably generous. Seats are a bit old, but they're reasonably comfortable. But basically, the train is not good for standing passengers. And I totally agree. That feedback is absolutely accurate. There's not a lot to hang on to. The vestibules are cramped. The aisle is narrow. You have to open 2 doors to move between the carriages, so no one ever does. We opened the whole thing up, bigger vestibules, and we really focused on the balance between seat width and aisle width. And I think we got it right. We've ended up with a train, and this was passenger consultation. All the seats are 450 millimetres wide, so they're the width of a priority seat. We decided to give everybody that. And the aisle is at least 800 millimetres wide. So this is just layout, mechanical engineering, just squeezing millimetres out of things, and getting to a point where the remit was 2 adults can easily pass each other in the aisle, which certainly isn't the case with the trains. It's quite uncomfortable. This delivers it very well. We've got a real spin-off benefit that we hadn't even thought of. You can get wheelchairs down the whole length of the train, which is really quite something. I've only ever seen that on sort of metro-style trains with bench seating down the side, but we've got it with a 2+2 seating configuration. Very pleased. Also, I've got a bit of a thing about standing passengers needing something solid to hang on to. So we've got a solid vertical grab handle on the back of every seat corner. I'm a big fan of that. And again, our passengers thought that was good. Okay, here's our train trundling through the North Swiss countryside. That is en route to Wildenrath, so that's almost exactly a year ago. And this is much more recent. This is from June of this year. This is arrival in Liverpool. It wasn't the first unit. This was the first unit to come from the Polish factory. The odd numbered trains, so our class number is 777. And as you can see, that's 007. So, of course, every Scout's wag in the depot named this train James Bond within 2 minutes of it arriving. And this was, I was there the next morning after it arrived to give it its inspection. It's very odd doing the pre-delivery acceptance inspection after the thing's been delivered. The reason being, we weren't allowed into Switzerland at that point. We couldn't get there because of all the COVID restrictions. It was the COVID was very discombobulating for trying to get people into the right locations to do their jobs. It was extreme. It's still disruptive, and it was particularly disruptive when we were doing our testing. So, if we have any, I'm sure we have plenty of traction and rolling stock engineers. Traction engineers in particular, our traction system comes from ABB, which is generally the case with Stadler rolling stock. We managed to do all of the traction testing and all of the EMC testing while ABB were not allowed to travel to the UK, which I found absolutely. We planned it, thought, well, we'll give it a go. But I take my hat off to all of the people from ABB. They were working remotely from us, but all the people from Stadler and the other organisations who work with us, I thought that was a phenomenal effort. You know, getting EMC testing is a very, very specialised art, and doing it without the traction supplier present is quite something. Okay, so here we are. This is in our new depot at Kirkdale. So I'll start to move on. This is the interior. We haven't got black flooring throughout. That's protective matting to protect the flooring. But you can see it's got a really different ambience to a lot of UK rolling stock. Light, bright, open and airy. Big windows is a real feature. An awful lot of people, their first comment is the windows are really big. When you get it outside, this is inside the depot, so it's actually it's in a slightly dark environment. Get it out into the daylight, and it really does feel light and bright. One of the consequences of the big windows, we're having a debate with Merseyrail about their reduced opportunity to sell advertising space because there's nowhere to put posters. Okay, well, I can live with that, I suppose. Okay, here we are underneath. So this, you might remember I talked about expanding the network and the idea that the train can go beyond the end of the third rail. Well, this is the space I was referring to. So this is most of the length of one of the cars. This is where we could either fit a traction converter and a transformer and have a pantograph up on the roof to be able to take 25 kV. But we're looking at trialing next year a battery pack in here. Okay, so put a traction converter in, put several tons of batteries in here. And we might think about, we're still toying with the idea that we could put a 750 volt pantograph on the roof, like a tram, so that possibly you could have a discontinuous electrification scheme. What we're very conscious of is that there's a distinct lack of enthusiasm for putting lots of third rail down, and that's quite a deep-seated view within the ORR. So it doesn't mean to say it's impossible, but we'd like there to be an alternative way of powering a vehicle than the third rail, or necessitating a lot of overhead electrification, which can be quite expensive. So we think this could be a great opportunity to power this with a battery. The other benefit you get with the battery, of course, is you're able to regenerate a lot more of your braking energy every time you brake. And as you can tell from the nature of our network, that's all we do, is we accelerate and we brake every couple of minutes. So I think it will be quite effective on our network. Okay, moving into the infrastructure. This is Kirkdale Depot, just north of the city centre of Liverpool. We asked our colleagues, we asked our bidders to basically design and build their own home. And this is the work that Stadler, who worked with Bam Nuttall, have undertaken and just about completed. There's a couple more things that I need to get down there and just check that they're satisfactory. But we've basically had a bespoke maintenance facility built around in one of what was initially a stabling cleaning depot with a wheel lathe. We've now created this as the maintenance hub for the new fleet. We've got a full-size driving cab simulator, which is I know many railways already have those. We've never had one, so we're very, very pleased with that. It's going to be a great tool for driver training. And this facility is absolutely bespoke and specific to maintaining Class 777s. That's exactly what we wanted. Other units would fit in there, but it's really, really well tailored to our fleet. We're also delighted. Stadler decided they like Liverpool. Didn't know anything about COVID when they made this decision, did they? But actually, they can get to and from us quite easily from Zurich. They inherited the workforce, and they actually made a choice, a little while ago, that they're going to put their UK headquarters in our depot here at Kirkdale. So there's at least 10 Stadler HQ people who now occupy our depot. We're delighted that they made that decision. A couple more images. On the left-hand side, that's the driving cab simulator. We don't have strange robotic people in our underground stations. Those are simulated people, but a really, really good training tool. We're very, very pleased. Corus provided this through Stadler. And on the right, this was a couple of weeks ago, where we were just doing our final bit of testing of the depot and the tools and the spare parts and the train fitted together. So this was us simulating replacing one of the roof-mounted air conditioning units. Characteristic of Stadler's train design, the floor is lower. I'll show you that in a minute. And there's an awful lot of kit on the roof. The roof is pretty full of equipment. There's as much on the roof as there is in the underframe. In fact, actually, if you took the bogies off, there's more on the roof than there is in the underframe. And that all worked very nicely together. The clearances were tight, but it worked. We can replace lots of kit like that aircon unit you can see there. Okay, let's move on to PlatformTrain Interface. Something that was really interesting, when we did our first phase of research, we asked people what they liked. We asked people what they didn't like. Didn't give them a menu of things. What came through crystal clear was the two things that people really didn't like was stepping in and out of the train. Like many parts of the network, I don't think we're that different to too many other networks, but there are some places where you've genuinely got a gap of vertically at least 400 millimeters. It's big. If you're infirm, if you've got a buggy, if you've got luggage, and certainly if you're in a wheelchair, well, you definitely need somebody with a ramp to help you. But it's quite difficult, even for able-bodied passengers. There's a couple of stops I've always found rather uncomfortable. So there's that, and then the gap between the train and the platform. And we know that that's particularly accentuated on some of the platforms where we have a significant curvature. And we have platforms with horizontal curve radii of less than 200 meters on the network. And it really does open up the gap between the train and the platform. Okay, so we started to look at this. Number one concern from the passengers. We started playing around with what we could do. We started off with safety. We had the RAID report into our fatal accident, which said, when you replace the fleet, investigate how you can reduce the gap between the train and the platform. That particularly was focusing on the gap at the body side, which is where the young passenger unfortunately fell. But it very quickly led on to accessibility and benefited for one of the councillors who we work with. So our political leadership is local. Was somebody I knew very well from having worked on Merseyrail and trams. A lady called Pam Thomas. There's a photo of her later, and she was saying, David, look, I know what you did on the trams. It wasn't me personally. It was the system design of the tram network. Generally gives a good interface. She was saying, can we just explore? Can we see whether this is going to be possible? So it was great. We got political buy-in very quickly to the idea that we try and do something different, improving accessibility, and also, as I've mentioned several times, we're like a metro, dwell time really important to us. Operational benefit of keeping dwell time down. And again, I know that reducing a step, enabling passengers to get on and off more quickly, making sure you don't need ramps anymore, that has the potential to improve dwell time. So we looked at a sort of package of measures. How do we do it? And we came up with, through our business case and the procurement process, we came up with this solution. So this is an illustration from Stadler's bid. So we've got a platform here that's at a nominal 915 millimeters above the top of the rail. We've got a floor height inside the saloon at every passenger door. So it isn't just wheelchair doors, it's every single door, 960 millimeters. So a couple of inches above in old money. And then the element that goes between, I've lost my mouse, this element here is a sliding step that's normally stowed underneath the doorway, and it slides out horizontally. And I've always known about these steps, that these were on the original Manchester Metrolink trams. But the bit that's come on that clinched this for us was this is an intelligent step. It has ultrasonic sensing on its leading edge, and it will detect the platform, and it stops 35 millimeters from the platform edge is the way that we've programmed it. And it does that at every single doorway. And it means that the step can extend a different amount at each doorway to give you a consistent step arrangement for every single doorway. What we needed to do to make this work is to obviously make sure that all the platforms were of a similar height, which they aren't. So over time, you know, platforms, things happen to platforms, things happen to track as well. It gets tamped, it moves. Generally, the track has moves up over time as the railway settles, it gets tamped, but generally it feels as though the platform is falling away. We had a whole range, we surveyed the network, there were a wide range of both height and offsets. I don't imagine we're actually that much different to any other part of the network. But the view that we took was, if we want to deliver these benefits, we have to do a major piece of civil engineering here. And we did, and that's the work that I've described in the middle. So on our 67 stations, we rebuilt nearly 100 of the platforms. There were quite a few that didn't need any work, because actually they were within a tolerance. They were where the network rail standard of 915 height and 730mm offset said they would be, but there were nearly 100 that needed some pretty significant reconstruction. Put these together, and the result is you've got the same interface at every doorway, at every platform, for every passenger. So we think there's a huge benefit that we're going to be able to deliver when we put these trains into service. Right, and just to prove that I'm not making it up, all right, that we ended up with something like that on the 100-odd platforms that we rebuilt. But yes, we did demolish an awful lot of platforms. We had a rolling blockade that worked its way across the network. It took us 9 to 10 months to do it. It was disruptive, but we communicated. We think we're pretty good at the communication with our passengers. If you tell people what you're doing and then basically you do what you told them, and provide a decent bus, and make sure that people in wheelchairs can get on the bus, deal with all of that, and people will bear with you. And we found that was very much the case. Despite the level of disruption that we introduced onto the network, the level of complaint was virtually nil. And we handed back on time every time, with one exception. Hunts Cross was a day late, I'm afraid. Damn, I've never handed back late before, but broken my duck. Okay, so there was a lot of work here. Most of it was platform based, some of it was track based, and some of it was a combination of both permanent way and the construction of the platforms. Okay, this is one of the as-built records of what we did. So you can see that the blocking that I've highlighted in red, those are the heights and offsets that we managed to deliver. So the network rail standard is 915mm plus 0 minus 25. And this platform here, which actually is on a horizontal curve, we got every single dimension. So these are taken every 5 meters, and we've hit that tolerance band, and we've got the right offsets as well. And similar results for every platform that we rebuilt. And I have to say, though, having taken the trains out and looked at what it looks like, it works. We're really pleased with this. Okay, so what the conclusion on PTI? Again, we know our approach is quite different. I've cribbed mercilessly from work I've done previously on tramways and metros, where this sort of stuff has been done before. But we think we've got a hugely improved platform train interface for when our new fleet comes in. It's required thinking complete system, thinking multidisciplinary. It's required funding, doing that infrastructure intervention over and above the fleet of trains. It was a significant, there wasn't a huge amount of change out of £40 million in that level of intervention that we put in. It was a bit of change, but not too much. And it required political determination, which I think was made considerably easier by the devolution and just the attitude and will of our politicians to say, let's do something different, let's do something that we think is a bit better, and then let's live with a better railway for the next 5 years as a consequence. So 3 key benefits that I've talked about before: safety, which is where we started. The RAIB report focused it on it. Accessibility came quickly, and then we've also realised we think there's a significant dwell time benefit. We're going to be able to, if anyone's in the market for a load of platform ramps, I've got an awful lot of them that we own that I'll be flogging off in the near future. So please let me know. Every platform, every passenger door. And we believe this approach, if others were interested, we think this approach could be adopted on a much wider basis. And certainly within our part of the world, we'll be looking at whether we can spread this further. Okay, train lengthening. This is another infrastructure intervention, and basically we're increasing passenger carrying capacity. Well, one of the ways we've done it is we've bought a train that's basically longer than the original train. So the original trains are just shy of 61 metres for a 3-car unit. The new trains are a 4-car unit, and they are 65 metres long. So when we couple them up, which we do, we'll be running them as 8 cars. They're going to be 130 metres long, 8 metres longer than what currently operates. It means we've got to do a variety of pieces of work. There's platform extensions. In some cases, our signals, we're not going to be able to get the signal size that we need, so we're going to need to move signals. And there's one particularly interesting piece of permanent way that we're going to be doing down at Liverpool Central. So that's going to be a real challenge because it's a very, very constrained environment down there. But okay, we've got to do it because we've got a reversing siding, and we need to be able to reverse an 8-car unit in it. We're cracking into Grit 4 at the moment. We've got Merseyrail have got their contractors in place, and this project is starting to pick up the momentum that it needs. Okay, the other big element is the power supply. So we bought this more powerful train. That's where the journey time reduction comes from. Installed power nominally a threefold increase. So a 507-508 is, I think, just shy of 700 kilowatts. A class 777, 2.1 megawatts of installed power at the peak. This is in order to deliver the journey time benefits. So we knew that the power network on Merseyrail was already under a bit of pressure. It's one of the areas that contributes fairly significantly to failure in operation as things stand. And we knew that if we tried to introduce this new fleet without doing this, we're just lining ourselves up for a huge fall on our face. So one of the things that we've done was interesting. We looked at, right, how can we increase the power that we can deliver to our trains? And one of the parameters that we addressed was current. And at the moment, the DC networks around the country, even though the Network Rail standards go up to 6,800 amps, we found out they're all limited to 4,000 amps. We're not quite sure why, but they are. And the answer comes back generally, well, that's what they do on the southern region. Okay, we're not the southern region, we're Merseyrail. Started exploring, right, if we looked at increasing the current, what difference might that make? And this was a really interesting piece of engineering, sort of working this to and fro, very unusual for the, I don't think anyone had ever asked Network Rail to consider this, or at least I'm not aware that they had. And in the end, we ended up plumping for 5,400 amps as our peak current draw. And basically that's how we're going to power the trains. We need more amps, otherwise we're not going to get the journey time improvements. We're introducing, we get a lot of low voltage on some areas of the network because the whole network is only fed from 3 locations originally. We're adding 3 more bulk supply points between Scottish Power, who's our local provider, and Network Rail. So we're making our electrons run not quite as far, so they won't get quite as tired and bring the voltage down. 8 new substations are going in, and an awful lot of copper has been going in. And I have to say this is a big project. It's 70-odd million quid. Delivery has continued through lockdown. We were aware a lot of the construction industry did not keep going through lockdown. We took a very different view, said, no, keep going. Let's do it safely. Work out what you can't do because you've got to socially distance. Let's work out different ways of achieving that. But otherwise, we think we should keep all the sites open. Hats off to Network Rail. Every site has remained open throughout the entirety of lockdown and beyond. We have hit every single milestone during that period as well. So there's been a bit of grit in the teeth and going on this project. This project will be completed early doors next year. And then I'm looking forward to testing it. Okay, wireless connectivity. This is another feature. We're buying a new train, lots and lots of systems on board that are microprocessor controlled, loads and loads of data. We've got a totally different beast to the one that we're used to with the electromechanical machine that we've had for 40 odd years. So we started thinking about this. It sort of started with the presumption. I've got a teenage daughter, so my God, do I know about it if there isn't Wi-Fi available in any part of the world? I'm sure many of you will recognise that type of model. We ended up not being able to write a business case for that, other than a business case that said throw loads and loads of taxpayers' money at enabling people to sit there doing that on the phone and ignoring each other. We didn't think that was very good, but we did start to get into, right, there's a lot of technology on board this train that we think would be really useful if we could access it from places other than the train. Most notably, we've got an integrated control centre, a place called Sandhills, just north of the city centre. And we started talking to, what if we made the CCTV systems on board the train available in real time into the control centre? Wow, there's no train in the country does that, to the best of my knowledge. People in the control centre, that's fantastic. Can you do that? Yes, well, we could. If we spent money, we could choose to do that. Could we look at recorded images that are held on the train? At the moment, I think every fleet in the country, they've all got CCTV on, I think, but you have to take the train back to the depot to download it. Could we look at the recorded images so that when an incident's happening, we can actually determine what's just happened? Yes, you can. Next thing you know, we've included the BTP in the conversation, and we're going to be providing exactly that facility, both to our control centre, but also to the BTP down at their control centre in Victoria. What about accessing the diagnostic information on board the train? Again, this is more commonplace, and many rolling stock manufacturers already do this. Yes, we can. We're going to provide a real high quality link to enable that to be done everywhere, including through the tunnels. We want to be able to manage operational incidents better. I think it's an area where many railways don't necessarily show themselves at the best when service is disrupted. You want to be able to communicate with passengers, both using the audio-visual screens. You probably saw we got lots of colour screens on board the train. Let's use them to tell people what's going on, what we expect them to do. Let's enable people to talk to the train. So putting all these systems together, and by the way, when we're not using it for those purposes, we can let the passengers use it and they can sit on their phones ignoring each other. And we're going to provide 100 megabits per second across the entire network to each one of the trains. Now, that will probably look completely old hat in 5 years' time, but we think that's a really good start. And we've designed a system so that it's scalable and upgradable over time. At the core of it is a blooming big fibre optic network and an awful lot of mass that we're putting in. So how are we doing it? Well, we procured it competitively, and Alan Dick Communications, who had recently been bought by Panasonic, were the successful bidder, and it's a trackside Wi-Fi solution that they're introducing for us. The current status, I mean, we're actually a bit beyond that. We're now well on with the construction phase, and there's a lot of fibre optic, a lot of mass going in, and the Orange Army is out there installing all of this equipment. As we go, and as we open the service route by route, we'll make sure our wireless connectivity is there. So I think this puts us, we're not the only people in the country looking at this, but it puts us somewhere near the forefront of what's going on. We know that a lot of other people are interested in what we're up to and are watching us with great interest. I hope that's positive. or waiting for us to fall flat on our face. I don't think that's the motivation. Right, nearly there. I talked about multidisciplinary. This is a multidisciplinary project, and it requires a number of core organisations to work together collaboratively. Done it in a little Venn diagram. I always like a Venn diagram. We don't actually, of course, do any work. We're the awarding authority, so we're not particularly visible out there in the real world of running a railway, but we orchestrate. So I guess I'm somewhere at the front of the orchestra waving a baton around. And the three key partners, there's Panasonic as well, but the three key partners we have to orchestrate is Network Rail, Stadler, and Merseyrail. Between the four of us, we're delivering almost all of this. Photo we've got down there, that's the four organisations together. We did a signal sighting exercise as soon as we had the cab built for the train. This was within, I think, 2 days of Stadler having finished assembling the cab. We had the signal sighting committee out there. That's actually in the factory in Switzerland. I don't know of anyone who's ever done a signal sighting exercise in a rolling stock manufacturing factory, but we did, because it was the right thing to do to help us determine our sight lines. Can we see our signals? Very, very helpful exercise that we did just over a year ago. That was in the summer of last year. So you need interworking between the organisations. You need a clarity of vision and everyone to understand what we're trying to achieve. You need to structure your governance to enable decision making. You've got to be willing to share information. You've got to recognise each other's perspectives, and on occasion, everyone else has to compromise. And maybe I do every once in a while. Okay, nearly there. Managing the transition. This is the phase that we're in at the moment. This is This requires an awful lot of communication and nuts and bolts project management. So we've got to go through the phase of handing the old fleet back to Angel. That started, we handed 2 of them back at a scrapyard in South Wales, and what happened to trains in scrapyards in South Wales happened to two of our units just over a month ago. We've got the delivery and testing. Delivery is well on. We've got one of the trains is on its way. I've just received the email. It's just crossed the Swiss-German border, and it will be with us in a couple of days' time. So the delivery is well proven. Testing, we've managed to work our way through. We're not quite at the end of testing, but we are most of the way through that now. Getting the infrastructure interventions done in time for us to introduce the fleet. The main one we had to get done was the PlatformTrain Interface work, so that we can deliver that consistent interface. That work was all successfully completed many months ago. The power will be there, and we'll get the lengthening works done in time for us to run our 8-car trains. Huge amount of training, both operational staff. This is the biggest change to happen to Merseyrail in decades. And then the engineering workforce are going to have to learn an awful lot of new tricks. This is a very different piece of rolling stock to the one they're used to. Managing the capacity of the network is really quite challenging. Where do you put trains? So we were only at the beginning of going through that process. It's all planned out in spreadsheets. We'll have to see how we go over the next few months and see whether the plans have proved to be effective. Fingers crossed. Getting the interfaces right between the disciplines, understanding each other, planning it, and communication is absolutely key. So I'm not going to get all cocky about any of this, because we're only at the beginning of this. It's all planned. We've only just started doing it, to be honest with you. Timelines, a lot of time on business case, and actually that was time very well spent. Getting the stakeholder buy-in, getting the definition of the programme, so that it started off with, you're going to go and buy a fleet of trains. No, I'm not going to just go and buy a fleet of trains. We're going to do an awful lot more than buy a fleet of trains. We're going to structure a programme of delivering benefit around a new fleet of trains. That took a lot of time for people to get their heads around, but we worked long and hard on it, got the strategic vision right, and I think we got the necessary buy-in and support so that our business case went through. The rolling stock procurement started just towards the end of 2015, and we got to contract award February 17, so reasonably quick for a public sector procurement, certainly not as long as some. The maintenance transfer took place just over 6 months later. That's when the 150 workforce moved from Merseyrail to Stadler, and all the Liverpool fans were delighted to be given nice blue and white overalls to wear, which are exactly in Everton's colours. I don't care, it's all Man United. Rolling stock design was completed, 3-stage design process, totally bespoke design. This was designed from a concept that was developed during the bidding stage, and at the beginning of the bidding stage, it was a blank sheet of paper. We got that done in under 2 years. So it was about 20 months. Really pleased with that. Went very well. Delivery for testing, as I showed you, back into Wildenrath in October 19. The infrastructure works have been very intense. We're there with what we need to be on top of, and the rest of it's coming at a good speed. And we're looking to put our fleet into service next year. We were originally planning this year, but we've had a number of difficult events. It's not just COVID, although COVID has really knocked us backwards, mostly to do with just getting people to the right place. But we did have the bogie factory closed for a couple of months. That certainly didn't help. But the first thing that knocked us back is our door supplies factory got flooded. Now, this was in May 2019, ended up under a metre of water, which really wasn't very good. That knocked us back about four or 5 months, I'm afraid. Our first train set of doors got totally obliterated, I'm afraid. So it's been a bit challenging, but we're still going. Okay, partnership. I've talked about it quite a bit, and I really like this photo. So what we've got here is we've got from the left-hand side, we've got one of Network Rail sponsors, Adiola, who was at this point was working really hard on the PlatformTrain Interface project. Next to her, Hein is Stadler's Managing Director for the UK. Lucy, who was one of Network Rail's managers out on site. You'd believe butter wouldn't melt in her mouth from the looks of her, but my God, put her in orange and she's ferocious. Absolutely great. I'll come to the chap in the middle in a minute. The lady down at the bottom in the wheelchair, that's Pam, who I mentioned before, who pushed me really, really hard on accessibility. And I take my hat off to her for it when we've delivered something I think really good. I'm hiding at the back. The chap next to me wearing the rosette without a tie, some of you might have spotted him on the news today. That's Steve Rotherham, who's the Metro Mayor of the Liverpool City region, who's had quite a high profile for obvious reasons in the last few days. And then over on the right-hand side, that's Andy Heath, the Managing Director of Merseyrail. Very much a collaborative effort between the various organisations. And then Dean, the chap in the grey shirt in the middle, as you can see, he's a bit younger than the rest of us. He came along to, he's a sort of enthusiast about the railway. He was doing his level 4 qualification in engineering, came along to look at our mock-up, and I next realised I've got someone here who actually knows what he's talking about. This guy's really interested, really interesting. Came and did a work placement with us for a couple of weeks during this period. He now works for Merseyrail. Absolutely delighted. We were able to give him his in into the industry. And there have been a few other people that we've been able to take in, and I love doing that sort of thing, giving people an opportunity to develop their careers, and good luck to Dean. And that is enough of me talking. So over to questions and answers, and thank you very much for your patience in listening to me. I wonder whether there's anyone left.
He's still here, David.
That's good, Jason. Right.
Thank you very much.
I'll unshare the slides if that's okay, so I can actually have a look at the questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, you should be able to see the questions. Okay, no, that's fine because you're in presentation.
I'm in slideshow mode, so I can't actually see anything. Yeah. Oh, we've still got some people here. That's good.
So thanks very much. A really thorough and interesting summary of the work you're going on. Some really interesting approaches to what you're doing, and some novel ways of getting collaboration to deliver stuff. So yeah, looks a really interesting project. So thank you for that. Right, so what I'll do, I'll run down. You can see the questions yourself. I'll read them out for the benefit of everyone else anyway. Right, so the first question, if I start right at the top, will the train be DC regenerative braking capable? Will it have DC regenerative braking capability? And if not, what is the limitation in terms of infrastructure or rolling stock?
The answer to the first part of the question is yes. So we don't have regen on the network. At the moment, we burn all of our kinetics again as he ends up in the atmosphere about 2 minutes later when we've braked. You know, it's not an efficient, you know, it's a piece of electric rolling stock, but it's not particularly energy efficient. We're introducing regen. That was sort of one of the first engineering judgments I made. Is right. Let's look at putting regen in. So yes, we're introducing regen.
Okay. The next question is: can David confirm the seat factory? This is Liz Lockwood, actually, an old colleague of mine from Porterbrook, so she's not familiar with the seat.
Okay. Seat manufacturer, yeah, it's fine, sir. It's it was really interesting doing the first article inspection, because the Faenza factory it's in Barcelona, the manufacturing site for our seats, and it was like wandering around the UK rail industry when we went there, which was FAI was 18 months or so, 15 to 18 months ago. And there was a Dutch fleet, and then there were about 6 or 7 different British fleets. All the assembly cells were around each other, and we were sort of the last one that had been set up. So it was really good fun. Not only were we doing the FAI of our own seats, we were also testing them compared to lots and lots of other people's seats. So apologies if any of you were involved in that, but I've been sitting on your seats. The one that I thought was definitely more comfortable than ours was first class IEP, but I thought for the other rolling stock that have a similar type of seat to us, we're a relatively short journey. You don't want arms on a seat like that; it'll stop people getting in and out. We feel we've got a very comfortable seat. One of the things we've really focused on, as I said, we've got the seat width 450 millimeters for everybody. We've really focused on the spacing, the leg spacing as well. So one of my team members is 6'6" and is able to sit in the seats without his knees touching the seat in front. I'm 6'2" and I've got a great big gap. I've only got little legs. Also, where we've got facing seats, again, one of the comments we had from one of our passengers was that the current fleet is like playing Tetris with your knees. I thought that was a great comment. Anyway, you don't have to play Tetris with your knees anymore. We've given more space in between the seats. So again, you can have two people with reasonably long legs, well over 6 foot tall, and their knee, you've still got a couple of inches between their knees. But fine, so
Okay.
is the specific answer to the question.
Very good, very good. Right, next
Quite
question is from...
seats. We changed a lot of the design.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, next question is from Andrew Roberts. With the intelligence, what consideration has been given to reliability? Yes, there's a comment here. Deployable steps on heavy rail is largely limited to the Class 390, he thinks. What is the risk to reliability of on the train or the platform edge?
Yeah, okay, great question. And that's one that I was asking of Stadler all the way through the bidding process. So it's absolutely right. That was my concern as well, is are we just building unreliability in here? What we ended up doing was the process of, some of it was education for me and members of my team. We'd heard of these things, but Stadler do something pretty similar to this on just about every piece of rolling stock that they manufacture. This type of technology is commonplace in Central Europe. So you see it's all over Switzerland. There's a lot, not as much, but there's a lot of this type of thing in Germany, the Netherlands, and quite a few other countries. So this is relatively novel for us here in the UK, but there are several manufacturers with a good, reliable track record. So we basically explored the information coming from the manufacturer. Our door system comes from Bode. I have to say, I've personally never worked with Bode before. I'm much more familiar with both IFE and Faverly. But I've been very pleased to learn a new manufacturer. So we had the evidence presented to us of this is how it performs, and if it didn't blooming work, SBB would be all over us in Switzerland. Okay, and then we also were able to build that into the contract, so that if it does become a source of unreliability, we'll make sure that is addressed through the mechanisms within the contract. And I don't just mean the technical stuff; I mean the commercial stuff. So it'll motivate Stadler and the OEM to rectify any problems that become apparent. On testing, and they behave very reliably. We haven't detected a particular problem. Then again, we haven't started racking up huge amounts yet. So we'll learn about that pretty soon. But I'm confident.
Okay, no, thank you, David. The next question from Malcolm DeBell. What is the peak current permitted for the train to push back onto the current rail during regenerative braking?
Thank you, Malcolm. I knew you'd ask a question. And the honest answer is I can't remember, I'm afraid. Apologies, and you're videoing this. So thank you, Malcolm. Malcolm, if you don't mind, I'll note that one down. Malcolm and I know each other pretty well.
Yeah. Sure.
I will, Malcolm, I'll come back to you and I'll copy the IMechE, and so if you want to make the answer available to other participants, please feel free to do so. Well done, Malcolm. Yeah. You flunked. Thanks.
Okay, let's move on. Right, next question. Has the Wi-Fi solution been deployed already by Panasonic?
Not in this specific configuration. Elements of it have. There's an Israeli supplier that provides the kit on board the train that again, they've not worked with it. So we've got all the elements have been proven elsewhere. The configuration that we've gone for. There's a company called Radwin, who I don't think many people in the UK will have come across before. I'd never heard of them, but Panasonic brought them and said, we think this gives you what you want. So that element is novel. The rest of it is, well, I suppose actually there is one other element that it's not, I wouldn't really call it novel, but the fibre optic cable that we're going for. We typically need to give us the data throughput that we're looking for, 100 megabits per second. We would typically need around about 50 cores of fibre, and you can a lot of the railway runs with a 48 core fibre cable. So we could have got away with that, no extra capacity. We're going for the recently product approved 432 core fibre. So we've got a huge amount of redundancy within that fibre optic core. So that again, it's a new product to the UK heavy rail network. It got its product approval on TransPennine, and there's a stretch of it somewhere up in the Pennines, I think, near Huddersfield. We're next, which is going to go across the whole of our network. but I'm fairly certain that'll become pretty commonplace over time. Then, yeah, we've got this company, Radwin, who, again, the kit looks as though it works okay, but we haven't yet done the full system testing. So we'll make sure we shake it down properly and make sure it works.
Okay. Very good. Conscious of time, I think officially we're due to finish at 7, but if people are okay to stay on for just a small number of minutes, we'll free if you just do another 2 or 3 questions. It's quite a long list of questions here. I mean, they'll be recorded, so it may well be that I don't know, David, you've got time to scan and perhaps answer some of these afterwards.
Okay.
I'll just quickly pick out a couple more. Do the Merseyrail tunnels have side access for evacuation? If not, do the trains have end evacuation?
Yes, they do. It's very, very unusual. I'm going to share. I'm going to show you. This is really some of the. I bet you some of the rolling stock designers out there might have spotted this. I'm just going to share. The end configuration is really, I think it's unique because, let me just go back. So the answer is no, we don't have side walkways, but we do have, so you have to get out the end. Can you see there that the door is offset? It's over on that picture, it's over on the left-hand side. The reason is this is to give more space and better visibility for the driver. So it's actually a very nice driving environment in a cab that actually isn't particularly deep. And the main structural element for the cab, normally it's the A-pillars either side, it's actually in the center of the cab. So the white elements that you can see in the vehicle centre line inside the cab, that's a very large aluminium column. That is the main load-bearing element in there. The door's over to one side, so it means that when you detrain, to get down into the forefoot, we have a ladder that works on an offset. It goes at an angle, very unusual. And then if we're going train to train, which as there's no side walkway and we have single board tunnels, obviously the door in the train that you couple to is on the other side. So we have a series of sliding steps and a fold down handrails with telescopic extensions in them. It's a really esoteric arrangement that deploy to create a safe environment to walk across train to train. Well, the Stadler have never done this before. I've certainly never seen anything quite like it. It's a very, very unusual mechanical layout that we've got. But it works.
Very interesting.
I enjoyed it. It was good fun. Because I am a mechanical designer, if you go back into my ancestry.
Yeah. Right. We've got more questions than we've got to sort out. Just one more. I will, in fact, Felix Schmidt has asked one, our Railway Division Chairman. So, did you have to improve the third rail infrastructure, i.e. improve the alignment quality?
No, we didn't, Felix. It's a really good question, and we seem to be okay. There's a couple of areas where we're just trying to work out whether the section gaps we're left with are problematic. There's one particular junction where we're thinking it might be prudent to extend the third rail by a few meters, but no, the shoe gear that we've got seems to work very, very well with the configuration of third rail that we've got. So no, generally the third rail we've left as is. But the power supply upgrade is back from the running lines. Good question, though. Very good. Thank you.
And then a couple of, or certainly at least one ex-Merseyside, it's Roberts again.
Okay.
To see Hamilton Square being fully step-free. Hats off to everyone involved. It's a big step.
Thank you. Hamilton Square is difficult. You obviously know it. For those who don't know it, it's quite curved. One of the platforms in particular is, I can't remember the exact curve radius, but it's somewhere between 100 and 200 meters. And it's significantly canted as well, and it works. That was virtually the first place we took it. If it can do Hamilton Square, it can do anywhere, and it works. It's lovely.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, on that, because there are some things, I think we've just run out of time. We're slightly over, and I'm conscious people have got other personal commitments and things this evening.
I could stop for a bit if you wanted. I could probably stick for another 10 minutes if you wanted, or do you want to go as well, Jason?
Well, no, we could run for a little bit longer if people say. I'm just noticing there are a few people starting to drop off.
Well,
so
yeah,
Probably the best thing to do. There is a small number of questions actually. I mean, what I suggest, David, is we can get these transcribed, and if you had a few minutes just to jot some answers down, I'm sure. I mean, the general feeling I'm getting, people are finding this an extremely interesting topic tonight. So thank you from myself. I found it interesting personally. Just for the formality of it, I will just ask Bridget Eichhoff now to give the vote of thanks, and just so Bridget, over to you.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, David, very much indeed. I've heard you talk about some of this before, but I've learnt a lot today. It's different things, and I've been very impressed as ever with the systems approach. It's not just the rolling stock, it's not just the platforms, it's the power supply, it's the communications, it's the staff, and keeping the passengers involved. And as you can tell from the number of questions, I think other people have found it fascinating as well. So thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to when I can come for a ride.
Great. Well, we look forward to welcoming you. Unfortunately, with today's announcement, I don't think we can welcome anybody just for the moment. We've got a bit of a pandemic to manage.
Yeah,
but thank you very much, everybody. I'll look through the questions. I'll stick on Jason, and then let's make sure we're able to provide the answer for all this. So thanks everyone for your attendance and your interest. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks. There's got a couple of bits to do. So yeah, thanks again to you. Thanks, Bridget, for that. Thanks to everyone who's still on for joining tonight. I think generally it's worked well. This remote arrangement seems to be good. So if anyone's got any feedback and they'd like to give the committee anything, any points or observations, please do that via email or the website. Thanks again to the Permanent Way Institute for jointly participating. Liam, I don't know if you want to say any closing words on behalf of your organisation.
Yes, just thank you again for inviting us, and just a little plug, if I may, for our next PWI event, which is on Wednesday the 21st of October. We'll be hearing from Phil Winship of Network Rail about the Newark Flat Crossing. So that's obviously open to the IMechE members too. Just go onto the PWI website if you'd like to get the details of how to join. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. And I'll just remind IMechE and non-IMechE members as well that our Midlands Centre programme is on the IMechE website. So under the Railway Division Centres and then Midlands Centre. The next session, next lecture is actually Felix Schmidt. So the Railway Division Chairman, who's Professor of Railway Systems Engineering at the University of Birmingham. So the Midlands Centre version of his address, because he's obviously doing various addresses around the different centres. It's going to be on Wednesday, the 11th of November. So the normal starting time, 17:45, and we're looking forward to Felix delivering that then. So that brings proceedings to an end. Thanks again very much to David Powell for an excellent lecture tonight. Very interesting, really informative. And I hope everyone has a safe, if anyone's travelling anywhere tonight, safe journey. And if you're at home, enjoy your evenings. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.